If you put Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus in the same room, they would not have gotten along. Not because they disagreed about Stoicism. They all believed virtue was the only true good. They all believed you should accept what you cannot control. They disagreed about something more dangerous: how to actually live it when living it costs you something real. An emperor, a senator, a slave. Same philosophy. Three completely different lives, forged under three completely different kinds of pressure. And when you place their actual writings side by side, you find something almost nobody talks about. They contradict each other, directly, repeatedly. This is the argument Stoicism has been quietly having with itself for 2,000 years. Start with who these men actually were, because the disagreement only makes sense once you understand the pressure each one lived under. Epictetus was born a slave in Hierapolis around 50 AD. He owned nothing. His body wasn't legally his own. He was freed in his 20s and spent the rest of his life teaching, first in Rome, then in exile in Nicopolis, Greece, with almost no possessions by choice. Seneca was born into wealth in Córdoba, Spain, around 4 BC. He became a senator, was exiled, recalled, and eventually became advisor to the Emperor Nero, amassing one of the largest personal fortunes in the Roman Empire along the way, even while writing essays on the virtue of simplicity. Marcus Aurelius was born into the imperial aristocracy in 121 AD and became emperor of Rome in 161, inheriting not just wealth, but absolute power over the known world, while trying to apply a philosophy built partly by a man who had once been someone's property. Same framework, wildly different starting conditions. And that difference in starting conditions is exactly where the philosophy starts to crack. Not because Stoicism is wrong, but because living any philosophy honestly requires applying it to your actual circumstances. And their circumstances could not have been more different. Here is where they collide first and hardest: money. Epictetus taught that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. He lived this literally, famously so poor that when a thief stole his iron lamp, he simply replaced it with a cheaper clay one and moved on. Seneca, meanwhile, was one of the richest men in Rome, reportedly worth hundreds of millions of sesterces, with estates across the empire, while writing essays with titles like On the Happy Life, arguing that the wise man doesn't refuse what fortune gives him, only refuses to be enslaved by it. Put those two positions next to each other and the tension is immediate. Epictetus would almost certainly have viewed Seneca's justification as exactly the kind of self-serving rationalization Stoicism was built to guard against. Ancient critics said as much to Seneca's face, asking pointedly, by what wisdom does a man amass such wealth while advising others to want nothing? Seneca's actual defense buried in his writing is more sophisticated than hypocrisy. The Stoic doctrine of preferred indifference holds that external things, wealth, health, reputation, are neither good nor bad in themselves. What matters is your internal relationship to them. A Stoic can prefer wealth to poverty without making wealth the foundation of his peace. Marcus Aurelius, notably, cited closer to Epictetus here despite being wealthier than either of them. As emperor, he had access to nearly unlimited luxury, and consistently wrote in the Meditations about stripping away attachment to exactly that kind of excess, treating his position more as a burden to be endured with discipline than a fortune to be enjoyed. So on wealth, Epictetus lived poverty and taught it. Seneca lived luxury and defended it philosophically. Marcus lived luxury and rejected it internally. Same starting doctrine, three completely different lived resolutions. The second fault line runs even deeper. What should you actually do with your emotions? Epictetus's position is the most severe of the three. He treated emotional disturbance, grief, anger, anxiety, as fundamentally a product of faulty judgment. Fix the judgment and the emotion dissolves. In his framework, strong emotion is close to a cognitive error to be corrected, not a feeling to be managed. Seneca disagreed, not with the goal, but with the mechanism. His essay On Anger treats emotion as something real and physiologically embedded, not merely a mistaken thought. He argued anger, left unchecked, becomes a kind of temporary madness. dangerous specifically because it feels so justified in the moment. His solution wasn't elimination. It was early interception. Catch the emotional response at its first spark before it compounds. This is a genuinely different psychological model. Epictetus is closer to what modern cognitive therapy calls belief restructuring. Change the thought, and the feeling changes with it. Seneca is closer to what we'd now call emotional regulation. The feeling is real and physiological, and the skill is managing its escalation, not arguing it out of existence. Marcus Aurelius, writing privately in the Meditations rather than teaching publicly, shows something closer to Seneca's model in practice. He describes ongoing struggles with irritation, disappointment, and grief throughout the text, never claiming to have transcended emotion only to be continually working on his response to it. Modern neuroscience, incidentally, suggests both men were partially right about different things. Cognitive reappraisal, Epictetus's method, measurably reduces amygdala activation. But physiological arousal from strong emotion also has its own trajectory, largely independent of belief that simply has to run its course, which is closer to Seneca's model of interception and management. The third and perhaps most consequential disagreement: should a Stoic engage with political power at all? Epictetus was skeptical of proximity to power almost by temperament, having seen its abuses firsthand as a slave in an imperial household. His teaching emphasizes personal, individual freedom achieved through inner discipline, largely independent of, and somewhat suspicious of, political engagement. Seneca took the opposite bet entirely. He believed a Stoic's duty included engaging directly with power, advising rulers, shaping policy, attempting to bend the machinery of empire towards something more virtuous from the inside. His entire career as Nero's advisor was, in his own framing, an act of Stoic duty. Better a wise man near the throne than a vacuum filled by someone worse. History delivered a brutal verdict on that bet. Seneca's proximity to power did not make Nero virtuous. It did not prevent the murder of Nero's own mother, an event Seneca may have helped publicly justify. And it ultimately cost Seneca his own life. When Nero ordered his execution in 65 AD on suspicion of conspiracy, Marcus Aurelius represents the most extreme test case of Seneca's bet, because he wasn't merely advising a ruler. He was the ruler. And the Meditations reads, in large part, as a 19-year argument with himself about whether it's possible to hold absolute power without being corrupted by it. His verdict, based on the historical record, is genuinely mixed. He governed with more restraint and philosophical seriousness than almost any Roman emperor before or after him. And he also made what many historians consider his single worst decision, naming his biological son Commodus as successor, breaking with the adoptive succession tradition of the 5 good emperors, a decision that arguably ended the most stable period in Roman imperial history. Here's what almost every modern retelling of Stoicism gets wrong. It treats these 3 men as if they're saying the same thing in slightly different words, a unified philosophy, delivered by 3 interchangeable messengers. They aren't interchangeable. They ran 3 different high-stakes experiments in how to actually live this philosophy, and got 3 different results. Epictetus's experiment: total detachment from wealth and power, pursued from the position of someone who'd already lost everything once. Result: a life of remarkable internal consistency, but one only fully testable by someone starting with nothing left to protect. Seneca's experiment: engagement with wealth and power, defended through sophisticated philosophical argument. Result: genuine intellectual contributions to Stoic ethics, alongside a life that ended in exactly the kind of violent unpredictability his own philosophy warned against. Marcus's experiment: absolute power, held with internal discipline and private self-examination. Result: one of history's most respected rulers, who still made a catastrophic dynastic mistake his own philosophy should have warned him against. None of the 3 won the argument. That's the actual insight here. Not which Stoic was right, but that the same philosophical framework, applied honestly by 3 serious, intelligent men under 3 different conditions, produced 3 different outcomes, each with real strengths and real failures. This is what makes Stoicism a practice rather than a formula. There is no single correct Stoic answer to wealth, to emotion, to power. Only a rigorous, honest attempt to apply the same core commitments to whatever circumstances you actually find yourself in. Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius were not reciting the same script. They were each conducting a genuine experiment, in real time, with their actual lives on the line. So the next time someone hands you a Stoic quote as if it settles the matter, remember that the three men most responsible for that philosophy would have argued about what it even means, sitting in the same room. The disagreement isn't a flaw in Stoicism. It's the most honest thing about it. The question was never what would a Stoic do. The question is what you, specifically in your specific circumstances, are actually willing to practice, not recite. That's the argument they were really having, and it's still yours to have.